Ratification is one of the swear words in the conveyancing fraternity, partly because so few people really understand ratification and how it works. The most important point under ratification, where we should start off, is the fact that ratification is purely contractual. It's not a clause like the cooling off clause that we find under the Alienation of Land Act, for example. It's something that can be changed and is usually changed in every deed of sale. So ratification clauses will vary from deed of sale to deed of sale. Ratification is basically the right that's given to the seller to continue marketing his property, to enable him to look at other better offers while he's waiting for a suspensive condition or suspensive conditions to be fulfilled in an existing deed of sale. So if a purchaser has offered the seller a certain price for his property, subject to him first selling his existing property, that seller, under ratification, gets the right to continue marketing his property to ensure that if there's a better deal on the table for that seller, that he can at least look at it. Certain things have to be complied with. Now, usually, the first thing that we have to look for under ratification clauses is when the seller is entitled to continue marketing this property. Is it prior to fulfillment of all suspensive conditions? Or is it just prior to fulfillment of the suspensive condition relating to the sale of the purchaser's property? The answer to this can only be found in the specific deed of sale that the parties have entered into. It's not a standard clause. The answer is not the same for every deed of sale. So the first thing to check for is to see whether the seller is able to continue marketing his property whilst only waiting for the purchaser to sell his property, or if he can do so even though the purchaser is only waiting for bond approval. So that's the first thing we have to establish. Secondly, we have to establish how this ratification notice must be served on the first purchaser. Again, the answer can only be found in the specific deed of sale that you're working with. The deed of sale will tell you whether this new offer must be given to the first purchaser to allow him to see what the better conditions or the better terms of the second offer are. Sometimes it will only stipulate that the seller is to notify the purchaser that there is a better offer. But if the deed of sale stipulates that the seller is to notify the first purchaser that there is a better offer and present him with a copy of such better offer, that must happen. If the agent doesn't present the first purchaser with a copy of the second offer, the ratification notice was sent invalidly and can be ignored by that first purchaser. So very, very important for the agent to check how this ratification notice must be given to the first purchaser. Thirdly, we want to know how this first purchaser is able to block this ratification notice. Because remember, ratification basically says that once the first purchaser has been given notice that there is a better offer, he must comply with certain things, either get his suspensive conditions fulfilled or waived, thereby making his offer a clean offer. Alternatively, the seller can contract with the second offer or the offeror, the second purchaser. So the first purchaser will want to know, and his agent will want to know, how to block or bat this ratification notice successfully. The answer is to be found in the deed of sale. If the deed of sale says that the purchaser will have 72 hours to waive his suspensive conditions in writing, for example, that is exactly what must happen. Now, the parties can contract that it can be 48 hours ratification notice. They can contract that it could be 7-day ratification notice. It doesn't have to be a 72-hour ratification clause. And always check for the exclusion of Saturdays, Sundays and public holidays when trying to calculate the 72 hours. So when we look at how this notice can be successfully blocked, the purchaser must comply with those requirements to the letter as set out in the deed of sale. So if the deed of sale says that once he has been notified that he's got 72 hours to waive the suspensive conditions in writing, he must do so in writing. He can't just pick up the phone and tell the agent that he is waiving those conditions. He must do so in writing. Now, a waiver is what we call a unilateral act. So it's not to be confused with an addendum that needs to be signed by both parties. The contract will stipulate that the purchaser needs to waive those conditions, which means he can do so unilaterally by himself. You don't have to draft an addendum signed by the seller. The seller doesn't feature here. It clearly stipulates the purchaser must unilaterally waive in writing.